Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our launch event today. My name is Paul Cotter. I'm a product marketing manager here at Stuart, and we are thrilled that you have joined us this morning for the courseware launch of Strategic Management and Planning by Stephen Strump. Welcome. We are coming to you live from Idaho Falls, Idaho. And I want to encourage you to be interactive with us today. Go ahead and use the chat feature that you see to the side of your screen. And let's get that started out right now. And go ahead and just chat in your name. Tell us where you're at, which school you're teaching at, and let us know if you're teaching strategic management. Are you teaching it this semester, next semester, or do you not even teach that class, but you're just interested? So go ahead and enter that in. And we'll get some banter going back and forth here. Garrett says that he's excited to be here today. Welcome, Garrett. Welcome, Lily. Once again, this is the courseware launch for our Strategic Management and Planning courseware with our author, Stephen Strump. All right, here we go. They're coming in now. David from Ivy in the Great White North, Carly from North Carolina, Rachel from Texas. We've got Stephen Strump, our presenter. He's from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Joe is from Coventry University in London. Oh, welcome, Joe. Looks like we're international today. Kyle is from Louisiana. Looks like undergrad and graduate strategy is what he teaches. Kendrick says, I can't hear. Is anybody else having problems with hearing me? Let me know, and we can look into that. I haven't heard anything else, Kendrick. Maybe check the settings on your computer and make sure everything's working right there. Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. I want to just go over a couple of things as we get started today. Pardon me if you see me looking down at the notes on my screen every once in a while when I do that. What I want to do is I want to just talk a little bit about Stuart, and I want to let you know that we have a lot of products. Besides this fantastic courseware that we have with Strategic Management and Planning, did you know that we have over 30 additional products, whether it's courseware or simulations? And we have them bundled into 3 different categories. We have a business category, we have a marketing category, and a communications category. So we're going to throw up a link here that you can see on your screen, and go ahead and click on that, and that'll take you to our catalog that shows the various coursewares and simulations that we offer here at Stuart. So go ahead and check out our product catalog. All right, now I want to just let you know that if you do have to leave early during the presentation today, this is being recorded and we will send it out to each of you who attended. Also, I want you to know that our CEO and founder, Stuart Draper, he is unable to be with us today, but because this launch event was so important, he recorded a video so that we could show it and he could give you all a little message about strategic management and planning. So I'm going to start that video right now and we'll see what Stu has to say for us.
Hey everyone, welcome to our launch event today. I'm Stuart Draper, the founder and CEO at Stuart. Yes, I'm the Stu in Stuart. It plays on the name, the word student, right? And it also is, we're an education company. That's where the name comes from. If you've never met with us before, this is your first introduction. I hope one thing you remember about Stuart is that we are on a mission to help educators, help students, help the world. And we do that with always up-to-date courseware and first-in-the-world simulations. And today you're going to get to see one of those new courseware that we've worked really hard to create over the last several months. But you know what? It's not done. And when I say it's not done, I mean it's done. You can use it. Your students will like it. You're gonna love it as a professor. But what I mean by not done is we're going to keep making it better. We always want to stay current with what's happening in the industry, so we will evolve in that regard. And we always want to make sure we're giving you, the educators, all of the tools and resources you need. So if you don't like something about it, if we need to improve something with it, we will. We're here for you to do that. Consider us your custom courseware and simulation providers, in that if we don't make it just the way you need it, we're going to keep working to make it better, and we will, semester after semester and time after time. Thank you for joining us for this special StuKent launch event. I can't wait for you to check it out. Enjoy the show.
Well, thanks, Stu, for sharing that with us. We are very excited about this courseware, and it's important what Stu said. StuKent's motto is staying current. And so every year we are updating our courseware with our authors so that it contains the most current examples. It's real world, real life situations for your students. So they're not studying something that's decades old. And our instructors, they love that. And so that's just one of the positive things that we have here at StuKent. I want to tell you about an event that we have coming up here. Some of you have probably heard of ProfCon before. StuKent hosts the #1 marketing conference for educators, and it's called ProfCon. And we're excited to announce that this year, well, next year in 2023, we are holding ProfCon live and in person, and it's going to be right here in Idaho Falls, Idaho. So it is a marketing conference. So if you are a marketing professor, then we want to invite you to come and join us here in Idaho Falls. You're going to love Idaho. We have an excellent time planned. The conference is actually from June 14th to June 16th. And we have an amazing networking event planned where you'll also get to see a little bit of the area here. Yellowstone National Park, Jackson Hole, Wyoming, the base of the Tetons. That's where we're going to network and get to know each other. We're going to share ideas. We're going to share best practices. And we're going to give tips and strategies to each other. It's a great conference. There's a link that you can click on. We have early bird pricing that's available now through the end of the year. So go ahead and click on that, get that scheduled, and get your funding requested so that you can make this trip. You're definitely not going to want to miss this event. So we really encourage you to do that. Also, StuKent has multiple events, and you can go to our events page at any time and see any of our upcoming events that we have. But going back to today, I want to talk about a little something special that we're going to do for you today. So as a participant in this webinar and this launch, we want to offer you free access to the strategic management courseware, free instructor access. So we're going to put a link up, and I want to encourage you right now, it doesn't take hardly any time at all. Click on the link and request access. It's going to ask you if you're an instructor. It's going to ask you the name of your school and just for your email address. And once you get that, we can send you access to the courseware. But if you do this, for everyone who requests access during our webinar and launch event today, you'll be entered for a $100 gift card for Amazon. So go ahead, take the time, take a minute right now and request access. You'll get to see the courseware in its entirety. You'll see all of its resources, including the syllabus, the assignments, the projects, the quizzes, the tests, everything. And you'll also get registered for an Amazon gift card. And if you're like me and you've done a lot of shopping at Amazon over the past couple of weeks, that would really come in handy right now for the holidays. So go ahead and do that, and we'll get you access to the courseware. All right. Now it's time. I want to bring on our author, Stephen Strump, and we'll invite you to the stage, Stephen. Stephen is one of our favorite authors here at StuKent. This is actually his third courseware that he's authored for us. Stephen has also been to StuKent headquarters here in Idaho. He came this fall, and we had a wonderful time getting to know him. And we actually went and we paddleboarded at the base of the Tetons and had a great time. So he can definitely attest to the beauty that you'll find here in Idaho if you do come to ProfCon. But Stephen, welcome. Yeah, congratulations on the courseware. We're excited. And we're going to turn the time over to you right now and let you take us on this trip and tell us all about it, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, as Paul said, the trip to Idaho was beautiful. So I want to thank Stukan again for having me out there. It was gorgeous just to paddleboard and the base of the Tetons. It was just amazing. But hello, everyone, and thank you for that introduction, Paul. I'm going to go ahead and get my presentation loaded just to make sure everyone can see that. So a little bit about myself, just so that we can start out. My name is Stephen Strump, as Paul said, and I'm really happy that you're here today, and I'm really excited to show you this new courseware. So just a little bit more about me and my background. My day job is Executive Director of Market Intelligence and Strategy at a university. So my day job is not teaching, although I do teach as an adjunct instructor, but it is working in market intelligence and strategy. So I really found my way into strategic management first through research, because I would always have a table and strategy meetings through my research work. So through there, then I've been able to, lead strategy meetings and strategy sessions. That's kind of how I got a seat at the table, was from that background. So most, strategy work is research-based. So a CEO is not going to prove your idea without research. So that's really important to have that research background. And you'll kind of see that theme throughout this courseware. So because of that, I've been involved in strategic planning, annual planning in higher education. And before that, I was involved in service line development strategy for a large healthcare system here in Michigan. And as Paul pointed out, I'm also the author of 2 other Stucat books, Market Research Essentials, which if you were paying attention to Paul, they did a good job of framing the textbooks that I have with Stucat behind him. So Market Research Essentials and Business Research Essentials. So I just want to say, if you like what you see here, I'm going to now give just a plug for Business Research Essentials in particular. And the only reason I'm doing that is because it pairs well with the book that we're showing today. So Business Research Essentials is a deep dive into the research that supports strategic management, right, and planning. So that foundation is really echoed here, and all the terminology pairs up. So if you teach both courses, if you teach a strategy course and a business course, it'll really make your life easier, I swear, to have the two combined, because the terminology and the methodologies will match up. So just wanted to give a quick shout out for that. And then we do have a quick poll. I really want to know, what are the pain points, before we kind of get into the courseware, what are your pain points in teaching strategic management courses? So I think either Paul or Abe over at Stucat is going to throw up a poll to kind of go through these. So these are some of the things that I've noticed, in courses I've teach that relate to business or strategy. Is, some of these areas tend to be pain points relating to, either the strategic planning process, the research and metrics, innovation. What kind of have been your pain points? And I see that if you click to the right of the chat box, there's a column for polls, and that's where you can answer these questions. So I'll give a minute for that. Looks like we have some answers coming in. That's cool. I can see where you guys are at here. Okay, we got some. So the results that I'm seeing are, the number one is really those metrics used to track progress and set targets. That does seem to be a pain point where students have difficulty connecting that to strategy. And the other one is developing innovative strategies. So we kind of have those traditional generic strategies, right? But how do we tackle those innovative strategies? And then to a lesser extent, but still getting votes, is that strategic planning process and the research used to develop strategies. And I kind of see the research and metrics kind of all revolving around that data piece, right? That's so important. So that's great. That's great insight, and that will help, further develop the book, as Stu said, as we go. We like to incorporate and kind of help out instructors where they see those pain points are. But we'll get to how this book might address some of these pain points as well as we go forward. So why StuKent strategic management and planning? So what makes it unique? What makes it really useful for instructors, and what makes it really useful for students? I wanted to kind of go through some of those top reasons why you might want to consider this book. So as you know me, from my introduction, this is really a research-based approach to strategic management, and that's really no surprise because of my background. This courseware really focuses on that research-based approach. I strongly believe this will benefit students because when they get in the work world, they're really going to need to back up strategies and their management with management decisions with data, right? And they also need to know, how can we measure success? How do we know that we succeeded or not in our goals? So I just got out of a cabinet meeting with our president, and he really just hammered this home yesterday about being able to measure success and having that really data needed to support strategy. With budgets, and budgets are always a sticking point. We need to have that backup because we don't want to move forward and spend a lot of money without the research to back it up, right? So that's really important. I do want to say this is not a research courseware, but it covers the research that managers need to know in order to monitor business performance, and what I affectionately call digging into the why, right? Which is essentially, what research do we need? What the research needed to see why a top level kind of key performance indicator might be underperforming. And then that can help lead us to a strategic response. So that's really why, strategy and research really go hand in hand. And I really wanted to hammer that home in this courseware. The other thing that I think is unique to this courseware is the deep diving into strategic planning. Several of you mentioned the strategic planning process is a pain point in in the survey or in the poll we just took. So content that I'm really excited about, because I really don't see a lot of in strategic management books, is the formation of strategic planning committees, the formation of the management, formation of the committee and the management of the committee, right? So a lot of companies conduct formal strategic planning like every 3 to 4 years or 3 to 5 years, with annual planning in between. And if this is really where our strategic priorities come from and our goals come from, I really wanted to include the best practices here for not only the work that's involved in these committees, but things like, how do we choose the right members? What's the right group dynamics? What exactly is this team responsible for? And this is useful really for any type of strategy meeting. So some companies, they may not do a formal strategic planning process, but they could use this process. Students could take this into the workplace and use this process for any type of strategy meetings. Like, I know these practices can also be used for ad hoc, planning sessions that come up throughout the year. We don't like to do those because it's kind of like whack-a-mole, right? We should have been doing that in the broader planning. But in the real world, we get, thrown these, we need to do strategic planning around this certain topic, right? So that can help with that as well. So I've been in a lot of these sessions, strategic planning sessions, where things just completely fall apart, right? So I really loved it, and I'm sure you all have examples of where that has happened too in the real world. So I love the chance to add some best practices to this area. Another thing that I really like about the courseware that was important to me to pull in was this idea of holistically mapping the process to connect the dots. And I love StuKent because I said, hey, can we do something like a flow chart and kind of light up the part of the process that we're in as we're going through the courseware, so that students know what part of the process we're in and how it connects. So the chapters all have where are you at in the process? So, which is really great. This shows a little bit broader perspective of the process, but we do show throughout each chapter kind of where you're at. So it's really giving students, starting with research, moving to strategy formulation, and then all those steps of implementation are included, so students can see how they all map together. It's really important for me for students to see the big picture of how things connect. They can always, go back to the courseware, go back to the literature to find out how to actually do each one of those steps, but just having the overall knowledge of where the signposts are, where they need to be at a certain point is really important to me, so they see how everything connects the dots. So one of the things when we really boil it down, if I really take all the concepts in the book, when we boil it down, there are really 4 overarching focus areas of this courseware, and you will see these themes when I go through. I'm going to do a brief overview of each chapter, but if we just really take a step back and take a look at what's included content-wise in this book. Understanding the environment is any content in the book that's related to using intelligence and the metrics used to track success. So that was the #1 thing you all said in the poll that was important. So that's a major focus area here. Also, strategies themselves. So what are the strategies that managers and business leaders have at their disposal? What's kind of those common set of growth strategies, competitive strategies, pricing strategies? So this is where we get into our business level and corporate level strategies are in those sections. And then next we have strategy formulation. So this is where we talk about strategic planning, annual planning, contingency planning. This is also where we develop goals, set targets, create those action plans and the kind of minute tasks, right? So all that is mapped out in this book. And then finally, strategy implementation. And this is the content related to all of the management responsibilities and tools to ensure that are the right controls in place and so that the tasks get accomplished effectively, right? So that's kind of what we think of as that traditional management piece, even though it's all management, right? For strategic management. So while the courseware really does follow a logical flow, starting kind of with what are the strategies, what are the research you need to apply the strategies, various chapters do focus on these overarching concepts. So with that, I'll show the table of contents. So the table of contents here, and I like I said, I'll go through each chapter briefly individually, but I'll talk about the flow real quick. So chapter 1 is an introduction to the major concepts we see throughout the course. That's no surprise there. We want to get some of those out of the way, some of those definitions. Chapter 2 provides the common strategies used. So think of these are the generic strategies or the traditional strategies, so that students know what's in their toolkit of strategic responses, what's possible to use in various situations. And then chapters 3 through 5 cover how research informs strategic decision-making. Then we move on to strategic planning. So how do we synthesize the information we have to make really solid choices? And from there, we cover implementation. There's also a special chapter on innovative strategies. So several of you have put in the poll that innovative strategies, I think that was the second runner-up. We focus on that. We have a whole chapter that focuses on that. So apart from those generic strategies, how do we foster innovation where there might not be sound metrics to really back up that process, right? Yes, I think any of this, Reggie, can be applied to any project or program. So we do go through kind of the formal strategic planning. But what's great about this, and I have a note to say this later on, is that I don't think any one company does strategic planning or strategy sessions exactly the same. But what's great about it is you can pick and choose out of this book, what you would use for a particular. So where I'm at, we do all this stuff. It just might be done in a slightly different order. So this is kind of the suggested best practice order from my experience and looking at the literature, but you could definitely apply these to individual projects and programs and not necessarily just a holistic organization. So that's a great question. So then we have the innovation chapter. And then finally, in chapter 10, we really take a step back and look again holistically at the process. So those of you looking at this for the first time who might be new to StuKent and you notice there's only 10 chapters. Well, number one, these chapters are very robust, but it's also the StuKent way to focus on information needed for students to kind of hit the ground running, right, with practical real world content. So when we use a theory or concept or refer to a theory or concept in the literature, we of course describe that and give credit where that is due. And we do cover those, but the focus is really on real world application. And that's why it's a little leaner than some of the other textbooks you see out there. So let's go ahead and briefly go through the chapters. I just want to give you a highlight of what's in each chapter and kind of what sticks out to me as things that are really interesting that you could be able to use in your course to hit the ground running. So chapter 1, this chapter is the introduction chapter. It defines the role of strategy. It talks about the types of planning, as you can see in the table here, and it defines strategic management. And one thing I really like about this chapter is delineating the difference between a functional manager who focuses kind of what's best for their unit or division, and between a functional manager and a strategic manager who kind of is the person who balances departmental priorities, but also has input into the overall direction of the company, right? So it's really not, you're a strategic manager, you're a functional manager. It really depends on an organization who has the power to have input, right? So some people who might be considered a middle manager might be also a strategic manager based on kind of the role that they're given in an organization. So there's a great section on delineating the responsibilities between each, which I think is useful to understand, particularly from students coming from kind of that management 101 course to a strategic management course, to understand that difference. And then chapter 2 introduces students to those traditional and generic strategies that kind of are the bread and butter of any strategic manager's toolkit. We want to make sure that we teach those. And so here we introduce both corporate and business level strategies. This is where we cover things like mergers and acquisitions at the corporate level, as well as things like expanding product lines at the business level. And one of my favorite things about this chapter is we really get into the pros and cons of each of these strategies. So for mergers and acquisitions, we kind of deep dive into some of the things that why you might want to do it, but also the pitfalls of blending corporate cultures. That's an issue, right? So I've been through that before in the healthcare world, and it's a major struggle, right? Trying to do that, and it's something that often gets overlooked. And then with expanding product lines, it covers issues. So yes, we want to grow, but how much are we going to cannibalize? So we talk about that too. And we also look at, risks and return on investment and what are some of the risks of, some of these strategies. So that's what we cover in chapter 2, just getting oriented to kind of what's in the toolkit. What can we do? And we're not telling them how to apply it now yet, because now we need to get into those research chapters. And I love chapter 3 because it's so fundamental, but it's often overlooked. And which is how do we know what requires strategic intervention? What are the tools managers can use to know when and where they need to act strategically, right? So it shouldn't just be a surprise that all of a sudden revenue or profit tanks, right? What are these kind of early indicators? Where do we need to look to understand where we should focus? And I think that's so important. So I really like students to understand the full cycle. So there should be metrics in place at an organization to monitor key areas of business. But we can also use these kind of top level KPIs to set targets based on goals and then check to see where we're successful after we've implemented that goal. So again, it's all about that cyclical nature, right? One thing I love sharing is the concept of a balanced scorecard visual as a wheel. Like someone taught me this years and years ago, and I've always kept it in my head as something that's been really useful when talking about the balanced scorecard. So a balanced scorecard can, of course, be visualized in many different ways. It could be color coded, but even if we don't use it as a wheel visual, I think it's really helpful. The metaphor here is that without all the metrics in the scorecard being balanced, the wheel's going to wobble down the road, right? So there's some examples of some really balanced scorecards that would travel nicely down the road, and some wobbly ones that probably will not. So again, the learning here is we want everything as balanced as possible. And we provide, several of those visuals just to kind of hammer home that metaphor. And I know some companies may not use a balanced scorecard approach, but almost every organization will have KPIs, hopefully that are just not related to financials, right? Hopefully they're pulling more in, but this is just talking about the importance of that so you know where to focus your strategies on. And then for chapter 4, we get to the internal research for strategic. Okay, chapter 4 explains that internal data, that internal research for strategic managers. And again, this is stuff that strategic managers should either have at their disposal or they should request. So from the previous chapter, a KPI is down. That's great. We know where to focus, but that's not going to give us enough information on the underlying issue that we need to understand before choosing an appropriate strategy. So what I love about this chapter is that while it highlights the research necessary, it also includes those mini case studies as signified by, again, I love the Stuart graphics department, that icon you see there, that strategy application icon. When you see that icon in the research chapters, you will find an example of how that type of strategy or that type of research can be applied by a strategic manager. So these are not research, how do we conduct research? It gives a little bit of a background on what research they should be looking for, or what research they should be requesting, but then how might they actually apply that? So one example is, okay, so you might do an internal survey at a hospital, a patient satisfaction survey. And we've noticed that our KPI for patient satisfaction is down. So, and we've pinpointed that it's the billing process. So maybe they would use the internal survey about billing to make improvements to the billing process. So it just gives that example of, okay, here's where we start, and then we can narrow down to where should we focus, right? So I really want to make these research chapters more than just research chapters, but really highly applied to strategic managers because there's such a connection there, right? So the next chapter we get at, so that was the internal research, and now we talk about those external research sources. So this is where kind of the market intelligence piece comes in. So, and here again, you'll see we use the same system of that strategy application icon to signify an example of where a strategic manager could use this data and how they could use this data. So a point here is that a lot of data an organization already collects on an ongoing or annual basis can be used, but it's also important for decision makers to know what to ask for and what they should request in order to find out more information about how they can move forward with a strategy, because everything needs to be based on some information, right? For the most part. So, for example, if growth through new products is seen as a key strategy, let's say that's a strategic priority, we need to understand that research is likely needed to support that endeavor and what to request, right? So they're not going to be doing the research, but they need to know what are the pieces of that research they're going to be used. They should have a hand in what's being collected and analyzed. And then we end this research, the research section on environmental scanning. And that's often a typical research project that dovetails into strategic planning, since conducting a formal environmental scan often kicks off the beginning of, and it's a core input into that strategic planning process. And so that's where we get to chapter 6, which is the data review and synthesis chapter. And I talked a bit about how the formation and oversight of planning committees is a real strength in this courseware, and this is where it shows. So this is where we cover committee representation, the role of the coordinating team that often oversees the committee's work, and the scope and tasks of the committee needs to accomplish. So what are they actually doing? How should it be organized? So this chapter is also where we cover those tools, where we cover those synthesis tools. So we have this information. How do we make sense of all of it? Usually it's a big data dump, right? And it's really overwhelming. So this is where we talk about the SWOT, the Pestle and Porter's 5 forces, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Those are covered, of course, as well in this section. And then I also like to suggest reviewing an organization's mission, vision, and values at this point in the process to see if based on this best thinking now, Are we still being guided by, does it still make sense? Are these still relevant? Are these guiding principles still relevant? So that's why we would cover, I suggest we cover that there. And then the next chapter covers strategy formulation. So where we take our best understanding of our internal and external environment and start to form those strategic priorities, right? So which we then take, and there's an example here, and then we turn those strategic priorities into goals, which then we blow out into action plans, and we eventually end up with a strategic plan, which could vary what that looks like, right, by organization. But you see an example here of how we start to take output from a SWOT analysis and then start to brainstorm on some high-level strategic priorities that we may or may not decide to move forward with, right? So that's just one of the steps we have in the process here. And then for chapter 8, even though what we covered up to this point is strategic management, chapter 8 is where we get to the part where we often think of traditional management, right? Role in strategic management, which is the oversight of teams implementing that strategy. And what I really love about this section in this chapter is there's a section on pitfalls to avoid, because I have a lot of pitfall examples of where implementation has fallen apart, right? And I'm sure you all do too. So there's a ton of best practices in the book. The flip side of that are the pitfalls. So like I said, I've seen action plan implementation fall apart more times than I care to admit. So here we cover things like not getting feedback from buy-in from the workforce at large, right? We need to make sure we get feedback from the right levels and the right people within the organization. Otherwise, they're not going to have buy-in. Not assigning the right owners for actions and tasks. We need to make sure students understand how important that is. Failing to develop methods to track process, things like not empowering work teams to resolve issues as they come up. So all that stuff is covered in this chapter, and they're really good management tips for implementation. And then again, you told me that innovation was kind of a pain point. So there is a whole chapter dedicated to innovation. So it covers kind of what I call the 4 market-focused innovation strategies, and you're likely using these in your current textbooks or teaching these in your current classes. We have some great examples in ours, though, that I think are pretty great. But what I really like is the additional focus here of process innovation. So how do we expand or be creative with our internal capabilities? And here's where we dovetail in some of the process improvement method tools to create innovation internally. And I am not an expert in process improvement, but I have a colleague who is a black belt in Lean Six Sigma who really helped contribute to this section. So I love that section. And I also really think the section on stretch goals is useful too, because that's really a tool used to kind of spark innovation, is the use of stretch goals. So when the book discusses developing goals in chapter 9, it walks through the SMART goal method, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And here we ask students to to develop a personal SMART goal and then turn that around and take a different angle on it and turn that into a stretch goal to compare and contrast. And that's a really good exercise for students to do to spark discussions about the different approaches and the different outcomes that might come from that. I think that'll be a really fun activity for your class. And then the last chapter, chapter 10, really links strategic planning to what happens, when we don't have strategic planning, right? When they're on those off years, when it's annual planning. So, and for annual planning, there's a great goal relevancy exercise that's really simple in nature. It's a nice little quick flow chart, but we use it where I work. It's useful for determining if a goal developed during that larger, formal strategic planning process is still relevant the next year. Things change very fast. We need to make sure that we're still on the right track. So a goal relevancy is very important, particularly for those organizations who do a formal, strategic planning process, every couple of years. So this chapter also covers other types of planning. So we have contingency planning, best practices for managing disruption is in this chapter. So I think what you'll really appreciate and what the leadership tips here. So including things like the importance of leadership visibility during a crisis, part of, being a part of industry consortiums, where best thinking can come out of, if something's impacting an entire industry at once, maybe we can, bind together and come up with a solution. So there's some tips in here about, managing disruption. This chapter also takes that step back I was talking about to understand the cyclical nature of planning and the management cycle, where we look to, first understand the environment, react by forming strategies, and then look at our metrics to see if we were successful or not. So I talked a lot about, the benefits to the students that I think and what's unique about this courseware, but also what I think you'll hopefully find a little bit similar, so you wouldn't have to change your course a whole lot from some of those core concepts. But what's in it for you, right? What's in it for the instructor? So I want to talk a little bit about what you're getting different at StuKent that you might not get from other courseware. So we are launching this courseware with 28 assignments. So I've launched 2 other books, and we've never launched with that many assignments before, although we do add over time. So this 28 will grow, but it's a lot to start with. And that's about 3 per most of the chapters. These assignments, another thing that I always hear feedback from StuKent instructors is having that option. So these are a mix of, for every chapter, there's an assignment that's a more open-ended type of assignment where students might do a mini case study. It might be an open-ended question where they read articles and summarize and then give what they would do based on the best practices in the textbook. But we also threw in a mix of assignments with direct answer keys for instructors. So, if you have a large class and you really need to grade fast, you have that option where you can kind of mix and match. Or you might decide, I just only want something with a direct answer key. That's like a matching assignment or a short answer, fill in the blank type of assignment. So we have those as options. One of the, and it looks like you're getting a free assignment here right now. So one of the assignments listed here, which I think you can download right now, is the Strategic Planning Committee assignment. I believe that's the one that's being posted, where students review the charters of 3 real strategic planning committees. So they're the charters that are available out for the public to look at. And they have to compare and contrast member representation and scope and activities. And I think, and that's the one I think you're getting for free. So you can use that one right away as you would like. The other ones I have listed here are SWOT assignment. And this is one of those that's a matching exercise. So students have to read a data fact, something that maybe was given to them by the research department, and they have to assign it to the correct SWOT quadrant. This is really helpful in making sure that students understand that the strengths and weaknesses are internal and the opportunities and threats are external. I don't know about you, but I even have that issue with my colleagues where we're working on SWOT exercises and things are, they're putting things in the wrong quadrant. So I really want to give them that assignment as well. And another one I also love is the stretch goal assignment, which I talked a little bit about earlier, where students create a personal stretch goal, and then they create stretch goals for organizations and kind of compare that to SMART goals to see, what's the difference? What's really are we trying to get at here? How would the outcome be different based on this frame of reference, right, of developing a goal? So a lot of these assignments work as mini case studies. So where they explore real world scenarios related to chapter concepts. For example, there's an assignment that asks students to identify the types of innovation that Apple uses. So, how would you categorize some of the innovation based on, we give like a list of 5 articles for them to read, and then they have to defend their choice. So that's an example of one of those types of assignments. But in addition to those, which I would call kind of mini case studies that are sprinkled throughout those assignments, there are 4 dedicated case studies that have been developed. And these are where students are given a scenario, they're given articles to review. They must, number 1, identify the concepts correctly, but also provide recommendations. So what recommendations would you have based on this particular scenario? For example, an implementation plan. Ford had a kind of a botched implementation plan a couple of years ago. So students are asked to review the literature, what went wrong, and then apply some best practices from the textbook in order to suggest improvements. So we invite you in the courseware overview to kind of look through those as well. And one I'm really excited about, which is a larger case study, is the comprehensive semester project. I had a lot of fun putting this together. This is something I'm really excited about. It focuses on AMC movie theaters and how they're navigating a post-COVID world and a world in which streaming dominates, right? So they have a lot coming at them, and it's so crazy. I don't know if you're reading the news. I'm kind of monitoring this on LinkedIn because I think it's fascinating. But like all the crazy things they're doing to try to diversify, right? So what are they trying? What diversification methods are they trying? They're trying different investment strategies, and it's just a really fun one to explore, to see. They're really like throwing everything out there to kind of see what sticks. And so it's a really good case study to see what have they tried, what has worked, what hasn't, how are they taking these market influences into consideration. So I'm really excited about this one. One thing I really hate about case studies as an instructor, I don't know if you feel this way, but when there's a case study in one of my courses, it's really difficult to grade, right? Because they're so open-ended. It's a lot of writing to review. But let me tell you, I went to great lengths to provide an answer key. I know it's not, it's difficult to have a direct answer key for a case study, but I went to great lengths to provide an answer key that really provides a checklist of how students should be responding for each of these major portions of the project. And it's based on me doing the work that I was developing, right? And what answers would I get back from that using the textbook and using the suggested articles that we have in the case study. Now AMC, as is every other industry, is constantly in flux, right? So I can't promise it'll be all there, but as of publication date, it's up to date, and we'll update this annually. We may add another case study or swap this out with something else, but this is really a fascinating one it's in constant flux, but it's a really great one for this project. So this is something that, in addition to the assignments and case studies, you could use as your final project if you would like, or your semester project. So I think I'm really excited to have you see that one. In addition to all of that, we are currently working on a simulation. So for those of you who are new to StuCat, StuCat offers these world-class simulations, which could also be used as your semester project. And what's really exciting about this for me is that StuCat's giving me the opportunity to help build this. So it's a companion simulation. It's not out yet. We're just working on it, but it should be out next year. So we're really excited. So this is kind of the planning document here. It's a quick glimpse into the planning of the simulation. It's still in development, so don't hold us to this exactly. But what I can promise is that it will complement the book really well, and it will be a super cool interactive project with sort of where we build kind of choose your own adventure paths. And I think that it's auto graded, so I think your most parts are auto graded, so you'll really enjoy that if you'd like to use that simulation starting next year. And so kind of finally to wrap up, I do want to show all the courseware. I couldn't go through everything just based on our time, but I want to mention that there are also lesson plans for every chapter. There's lesson plans that go through what assignments you could be covering, what are the points you should be discussing. We also have slide decks with speaking notes so that you have all of the information in the speaking notes. We have quizzes, a midterm, and an exam, which all told equals 350 questions out of the gate. We will continue to add to those banks, but to start out with, it's 350 questions. We also have a sample course schedule, which I will show you as this next slide. That's a little small, I apologize, but you can get this with the courseware when you sign up for the demonstration. But this is a look at the suggested course calendar with all of the reading, quizzes, and assignments, the AMC project, and the exam. Of course, I wouldn't recommend running all of these assignments that are listed, but I wanted to show what you can choose from. So what you prefer, either an open-ended assignment or one with a direct answer key. So many of these assignments, I also want to say, so let's say you choose an assignment for, you want something kind of quick and easy to grade for the assignment for the week, but you also teach an online class and you want to use one of these for the discussion board, one of the more open-ended ones. I would highly recommend that. These could be discussion board questions for sure for an online course, or even just classroom discussion where you're not grading, but you're walking through some of these assignments as, just something for your in class, right? If you're teaching in the classroom. So I really can't, I'm about to get off, wrap up here and turn it back over to Paul, but I can't wait for you to look at these resources and take a look. So the way to do that again is to schedule a time to go ahead and go through the courseware. And before we transition to the Q&A, we kind of have a fun little trivia question, and I will turn that part over to Paul. So thank you, everybody. I really appreciate letting me introduce you to this courseware.
Thanks, Stephen. That was amazing. And we are so excited for this new courseware. I'm especially excited for these assignments and the case studies that you've done. They sound really great. And I know that that's really important to instructors in this course, is having those case studies. And then the simulation that's forthcoming next year. That'll be exciting also. But we did want to remind you that we are going to do a Q&A. So if you have any questions right now, go ahead and enter them into the chat and we'll ask them. We have gathered some of the questions that have been asked throughout the webinar, and we'll ask those also. But just as we're starting out, we have a trivia question. In what year did streaming video surpass, oh, sorry, it just got pulled off for me. Can we throw that poll question? Oh, there we go. In what year did streaming video surpass cable subscriptions worldwide? So while you're thinking about your questions, put your answer into that, and we'll give it a little bit, and Stephen can give us the answer on that. I'm going to pull up our questions, and I just want to remind you also that before we end today, we will give away a $100 gift card. So to anyone who has signed up for the free access to the courseware. So if you haven't done that already, sign up for that so that you can be entered into that drawing. Now, Stephen, here are some of the questions that we have. How do the case studies you choose provide students with a well-rounded view of strategic thinking in different business scenarios?
Sure. So I kind of went quickly through the case study, so I can talk about them a little more, and that's a great question. So there are 4 dedicated case studies in addition to the AMC case study. So with Netflix, they're evaluating KPIs. So that gets to kind of one of those sticking points of the metrics, right? So students will think, we ask students there to think critically about what makes a good KPI and how to measure success. So that's really how we, have that be part of the, focusing on that particular concept, right? The other one that we have is with Ring cameras. They have been, there's articles that's available. And what we do with that one is we ask students to collect and evaluate kind of those internal and external factors. We give them some sources, but they're free to go off on their own and pull some other ones. And we have them develop a SWOT analysis around that. And what's great is we do provide an answer key with like some of the top things, right, that are coming out of that SWOT that they should be picking up on and putting them into the right quadrants. With Ford, that's a real fun one because there's a lot of literature out there of how Ford botched their launch of their 2020 Explorer model. So with that particular one, we have students revise Ford's implementation plan. So let's go back in time. Let's first identify the mistakes, but let's go back in time and plan for a potentially better outcome based on, best practices in the courseware. For the final one is Starbucks, and that one's focused on innovation. So we're really having students looking for evidence of types of innovation. And this really helps students realize different approaches to innovation. I'm not so huge on, they need to make sure that they define it correctly, although that's part of the assignment. but if they can defend why they would put it in that type of innovation and how that has helped Starbucks, I think that really opens up their scope, and they'll understand innovation more.
Great, thanks for that added explanation on the case studies. Those are going to be awesome. I can see from the trivia question that the answer that most people selected, 42%, selected the year 2020. Stephen, what's the answer?
The answer, and I'm a data person, the source of this is the MPAA, Motion Picture Association of America. It's 2018.
Okay.
So we had a few people from 2018, but yeah, the bulk were 2020. That's interesting. We were having this discussion earlier, and we thought a couple of people at the Stukan office thought it would be even earlier than 2012.
Yeah, we did. Okay, we have a question from Kyle. Our graduate course is 10 weeks in duration. Can I effectively compress this from 15 to 10 weeks?
Yes, absolutely. And we can help you do that. If you send, we can make a 10-week calendar out of that, but you can definitely collapse. So you can see, I can go back to that slide too. So you can see, we're stretching out a couple of these chapters that cover several weeks. So you could definitely condense that, and we could provide where we think that could be condensed. And obviously you're going to want to pick and choose from these assignments. But that would be, in fact, one thing we're going to do is offer this calendar at various different course lengths, right? So at our institution, we have a lot of courses that are accelerated 7 weeks. So we'll provide a 7-week calendar, a 15-week, but it totally could be condensed to a 10-week.
Great. Another question that we have is, what would you say is one of the most difficult strategic management topics to teach? And how does your courseware help educators effectively teach it? Sure.
So I think, kind of some of the ones that we had in our first poll are really the difficult ones that I have seen, are kind of some of the pain points with students. And that is, you kind of, the audience, hit the nail on the head, I think, in terms of, what I think is a pain point. And I'm so happy that we have them included in the book, but it's those research used to develop strategies, right? And the metrics used to track progress and set targets. So we think we can go in and be super creative, and we can, and that's great. And there's methods of brainstorming and everything. But at some point we need to have it be research-based, and we need to know how to define success and set those targets. So I think that's difficult to teach and relate to students. So I'm really hoping by hammering that home in this courseware, that's going to improve for students who use this courseware. You also mentioned the developing innovative strategies, which is why I wanted a whole chapter dedicated to that, because it's really different from those generic strategies, right? We want to let students know what the bread and butter is in terms of strategies and what's in their toolkit, right? But then how do we be innovative? And so that's why that whole chapter using stretch goals and market-focused innovation and process innovation is so important. And then finally, I think what's kind of unique and what I talked about was that the strategic planning process. So, not everybody uses a formal strategic planning process, but they're likely to use bits and pieces of it. How do we manage those committees? How do we make sure that the right people are on board, and how do we make sure that as a manager, we can oversee those committees and have the right dynamics and controls in place. So I really think those are we probably do teach some of that, but I think we could be more effective. And that's why I really wanted to zero in on some of those in particular.
Great. We just had a comment during your response from Joe. He said the hardest thing is to keep on strategic management rather than going into strategic marketing, especially if they have that module as well. So
yes, yeah. So there is some overlap there, right? For sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Stephen, just to wrap it up today, I just want to ask you one final question. When Stu in his video message that he gave, he talked a little bit about the process that we go through for updating our courseware. And since you are an experienced Stukan author with multiple courseware, could you maybe talk about how you go about updating courseware for instructors?
Sure. I'd love to do that. So, first of all, to develop this book, I put my own expertise in, and then of course I'm not an expert in everything. So I conducted a lot of research on best practices, and StuKent also teamed me up with two wonderful peer reviewers who also teach strategic management courses and strategy courses, and they helped shape the book as well. So that's kind of step one, right? Is putting that out there. But what I really love is every year, StuKent will ask you for feedback, what's missing, what would you like to see, what is not jiving well with the students, where do we need to, maybe, I'm very much a practitioner in strategic management. So someone might say, you're describing this correctly, but you're using the wrong terminology. That's fine, let me know, and we will update it. We update it every year. So that's kind of the process. So every year I get feedback on what instructors want to see. And that's how I continue, learning as well, and making sure that this continues to stay current. So every year we add and rearrange by really listening to feedback from you. So I see this, courseware expanding over time. The benefit of being, a StuKent customer is you have a hand at, making sure that things that are important to you in the class have a potential to also be in the courseware.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Stephen. All right. Now, we had mentioned that we had a $100 Amazon gift card for one lucky person who requested access to the courseware. And I have the winner. The winner is Joe Shammy from Coventry University. Congratulations, Joe. We'll be reaching out to you so that you can collect that. I also just want to put a plug in and remind everyone that this courseware, along with all of StuKent's courseware and simulations, is LMS compatible. So if you have any questions or concerns about that, please reach out to us, and we can answer any of your questions with that. Thank you, Stephen, for joining us today. We are so excited for this new courseware. We're excited for all of you who joined with us. If you would like to connect with Stephen, we have a link to his LinkedIn profile. Go ahead and connect with him. He'd love to get to know you more as you use this course and as he develops it further for strategic management and planning. We also have one more surprise for you. If you weren't the lucky winner of the $100 Amazon gift card, we are going to offer one more. If you schedule a demo, a walkthrough with our sales department and walk through the courseware before the end of the year, we'll put you in a separate contest to win another $100 Amazon gift card. So feel free to schedule a demo with our walkthrough with our sales department, and you can go through those case studies. You can go through those assignments more specific into the courseware, the syllabus, and see how it will actually integrate in with your classroom. So take advantage of that. Thank you, everyone, once again for joining us. We're so excited for this new courseware, and thank you, Stephen, for all your hard work and for partnering with us at StuKent. Everyone, have a great day.